activities do you have?
Is there anybody there? Anyone hear me? Oh boy.
I can hear you, but I'm also a participant.
Okay.
They're probably having some problem at the schoolhouse.
Bummer. But do you think they know that we're out here? Maybe the meeting's going on. Which would bum me out. Oh, there's Nona. we can't get in. Peter Littman's there. No, we can't see. No, we can't hear you. I see Nona smiling, that's all. No. Karen, Peter Littman's on. So we can't, can we not speak during oral communications? I can't. No. No, Nona can't come. Oh, you mean me? Mm, Okay, is there anybody in the schoolhouse? I hate to have you wait for oral communications, but I will come. If you think, and, well, I mean, can you? Yeah, but that wasn't, no, we weren't notified ahead of time that we couldn't. And can anyone else hear me on this list? Okay, Peter Lippman, he's the hook that I put out there. I want to hear him, what he has to say tonight. He was the one that suggested that someone make a loan, you know. Okay, so we can't, or we're not, so in other words, you're not trying to tell me that I can get in. Okay. Shit. Okay. All right. Okay, okay. But everyone has to come down to the schoolhouse. Well, tell Craig Taylor, they need to get their shit together. All right, goodbye. So we're not going to be able to get in. Okay.
It's unanimous.
Well, so I'm getting the inside image, or you are too. So we're good.
So we're good? Excellent, thank you. Okay, so the issue here is you need to log out of the previous meeting. That's the problem. Got it.
But it didn't show that it was anything.
Yeah, okay. So except it had to be that. That's the only way you would have known.
I hear you,
Okay,
Ishan.
thank you very much.
I hear you.
Thank you, Dana. That's great.
Okay, good. All right, bye.
Or Craig. Okay, welcome. Thank you for being here, and thank you to those of you who are online for joining us. I'm going to call our meeting to order at, it matters what time, it's 7:15. Thanks. Greg is here, Terry's here, Bev is here, Betsy's here, Gary's here, Nona's here. I am as well. I'm going to invite any oral communications that aren't agendized first. Great. I'm going to try and unmute you. Are you muted yourself? 650-400-3056.
Yes, that's me.
Oh, I don't know your phone number, Dana. Would
I
you
know,
like to say
I know you
something?
So I really, you guys, most of you are aware that a group of us went to see the Jellic Ranch last Saturday. I tried to do an invitation of people on committees, of all committees other than the council. And we took a tour and everybody was very, I don't want to use the word smitten, but was really felt strongly, given the proximity to the town center, that it was very important for the town to acquire this property. And there's also the possibility of housing in the back on the rectangular area that backs up to the behind the horse property. So, and it could possibly be accessed through there. And then we had this whole thing yesterday about the El Mirador Ranch. And that's very complicated and I don't understand that, but maybe it's possible at some point for Post to give access to that parcel in the back. At any rate, the possibilities for the front parcel are wonderful. And then some of us were sort of brainstorming in that meeting and said, maybe down the road, what could happen is that the house with an acre and a half, 2 acres could be sold off, the Jellic house, which would then provide, a lot of money for the acquisition. I mean, we've got close to $8 million. If we could get $12 million for the house, we're almost there. So anyway, I just wanted to tell you guys that this is what happened. Betsy was there, so she can fill in a little bit more. But we're really enthusiastic about proceeding. The citizenry, the people on committees, they're all going to take this information back to their committees, trails, parks and rec. Everybody's going to take this back and talk to their committees. So we're pretty excited and we really hope that this can happen. One other thing I wanted to share is apparently Nancy Lund and other people are planning maybe a celebration of some of these iconic historic properties, Jellic, Rosati's, and this fall maybe have a celebration of those properties. And I wanted you guys to know that because I think that that's important. So that's all I have to say. If you have any questions, you can ask me, but I just wanted to report in that the people on committees have been to see the Jellic Ranch, and we support the acquisition of this land. Thank you.
Thank you, Jana. We actually have an agenda item under new business to talk about our open space funds priorities. So that may be something we're going to talk about as a committee in a
Right.
few minutes. So I'm glad to have your report. Thank you. Any other oral communications in our agendas? Okay.
Somebody.
So we'll move on to the approval of the minutes from the August 3rd meeting. Thank you, as always, to Nona for beautifully preparing excellent minutes. Do you have any changes or comments? Should we have a motion to approve them? Betsy? Carrie, thank you. All in favor? Wonderful. So that looks unanimous. All right, so our first agendized item under old business is Gary reporting on the slow because of me, but needed progress on getting the website updated. Gary?
Well, I'd hoped would have had something to show you before tonight, but things just get in the way.
I do.
So I have been working with Carrie too, and I think she really knows how to put a website together. Done so far, but it's not ready even for draft time yet. By the next time we meet, I hope to have 3 open spaces: Springdown, Frog Pond, and Ford Park.
Wonderful.
So that's what I'm aiming for. As long as we don't meet again in 2 weeks. So that's progress is being made.
Wonderful.
I just want to say, I think Carrie is probably swamped these days. Craig, would you think? I understand. Yeah, staff on there. But we got a good start, and looks like we'll be able to have something else.
Wonderful. Thank you, Gary. It has also come up in past oral communications that our minutes haven't all been updated, and I'm working on gathering those and getting those on the website as well. So that is something that will be available as well. Terrific. Next, it would be great to hear from our Hawthorns subcommittee. That's been a busy time in all things Hawthorne. So I'm not sure who I'm handing it over to, Betsy.
Well, I'd like to first introduce Jeff.
Excuse me, but we can't hear.
Sorry, I totally forgot.
We're going to try that
Is this
again.
on?
Closer.
If you cannot, you can hear, if everyone can hear me, I'll use the one in front of me. I just wanted to say there was a terrific, Mid-Peninsula hosted a terrific meeting on October 26th. And Bev's going to weigh in about some of the takeaways from that meeting. I will just say it was quite a positive example of process and tremendously astute listening on behalf of the POG members and Mid-Peninsula to public input. Bev, take it away, and I am going to be handing out some materials while Bev's doing that.
I wasn't able to.
How's that? Is that better? Hello there. There's going to be another
walking tour of the Hawthorne itself on November 10th. You have to sign up if you'd like to go. And I found that very interesting. The time I went, especially now that there have been some plans presented as to possible parking places and things like that, that I'm sure that they will be talking about. Basically, a lot of important questions came up that I've been reading about. One had to do with the conservation easement, and it had to do with whether or not it's really asking concrete that there shouldn't be a trail that could be seen from the Portola Valley Ranch. And the gal who was leading this meeting, facilitating the meeting, was Kathy Garrett, and she was really good. But she just said, well, we have to be good neighbors. And another one of the COG members said, why don't, he said, "But just let Portola Valley Ranch to deal with it." So, but she kept saying we have to be a good neighbor and so forth. So I'm not sure that how that really worked. Later in the process, somebody suggested that maybe we could just put a bench. But when you go there, you will see a trail up at the top of the hill, and where a bench could be put, so you can sit and look at it rather than having to, build a trail down into it. Anyway, that's a possibility. The other thing that was brought up was something that I thought about, and Betsy thought about. And what's the matter with going through the old Easthead building, the Santos Road? And what they had said originally was the visibility is too terrible. The curves and things, and the transportation can't get up there. And the facilitator just kept emphasizing that, how bad the road is. And people kept kind of bringing it up. And she said, well, what we're doing today is the area. Maybe we can look at the old home site area another time. She says there's a lot of archaeological research that needs being done like that. So don't expect that is the answer. And then I thought, then they broke into small groups, two different groups. And they looked at the proposals. Here's, if you haven't seen this, here's the parking area. That is like a planner. So that's something that we talked about. And then Betsy, you just gave this one?
I'll talk about that map, which is a new map. No one's seen that before.
I think all of these are in the packet, yes.
Not the one I
Not
just
that
handed
one.
out.
Okay.
But everything else should be in the packet.
The parking one is in the packet.
Came up and they said they kind of like a parking scheme. And they could go up from for the road, I guess. There, but what people seemed to like was road 1 and parking lot 3. So, no dog park, dogs on leash only. People talked about a possible route that's only for hiking. Encourage connector entrance at Portola Road and Alpine Corner because there's a bus stop there. And so forth. That's it. That's a money.
Sweet. Thank you, Bev. That was great and nice overview. So it was quite remarkable how after original weigh-in, there were two large breakout groups at this meeting, and how much progress those two breakout groups made impressed the Sox even often of the Mid-Penn staff. They were very pleased that there was a tremendous amount of consensus. And so there really was a concerted effort to appoint the Hawthorne's entrance, which is the driveway across from Roberts, as the main entrance point, and to connect that with, as Bev said, option 3, parking area option 3, which at this moment in time was thought to be a 50-car lot, but they really didn't dial into the number of cars that they anticipate there. That was hinted at by staff in the maps that were a part of this package and a part of their package to everyone, but that remains to be ironed out. And for those of you listening online, as well as our committee members, originally December the 16th, the meeting on December 16th would be the next meeting. It was originally planned to be a site meeting at Hawthorne's. However, Mid-Penn staff said that we've made such good progress. What would you all think, they're asking the POG members, about meeting back at the headquarters for an in-person meeting, and we will take you on smaller non-quorum group tours through Hawthorne's in the meanwhile. So that's what's going to happen. There will be another meeting in December on site, which means that this process, the process is a little more accelerated even than we thought. So the time to weigh in, if we want to weigh in, is going to be before that December 16th meeting. And towards that, I gave a go at what I thought could be the bones of a letter if we want to write a letter on behalf of open space. I will preamble that by saying that it's open space issues. Mid-Peninsula is really, they're fabulous when it comes to open space. They're tremendously observant about the plant communities, about the endangered species, and their packages really well put together and quite conservative in that respect. So when you think about what's in the best interests of our plant communities, of the land, and wildlife, that's something that Mid-Peninsula does extraordinarily well. The POG, their focus of this group is public access. It doesn't have a broader focus than that. So when we are writing to them, we're really taking that kind of perspective, which means that from the standpoint of open space, we may have less to say. But if I were to think of several things to say, one would be that when our committees work together, we work most effectively, I think. And some of the issues that our other committees have raised, I think we could afford to go out there and support. And so the 3 areas of interest to me are, you can refer to the letter here, the Hawthorne's easement. Because there are people listening online, shall I?
I think since it's not in the packet, we probably should read it.
Yeah. Right. I have not, this is not a polished letter yet. There's no open.
We're going to receive it
paragraph.
as draft language.
This is rough draft.
Perfect.
Thank you, Kristen. So regarding the Hawthorne's easement, Portola Valley's, this is a recommended idea to be refined. Portola Valley's Open Space Committee urges Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District to accelerate the granting of an easement in favor of the town of Portola Valley. The easement would be designed to shift the Alpine Road Trail up and in from the road for the primary purpose of accommodating a safe route to school, though it would serve all walkers, bicyclists, and equestrians. Our position aligns with the Trails and Paths Committee and Bicycle Pedestrian and Public Safety Committee recommendations, and in addition, numerous members of the October 26th POG meeting who offered broad support for such a trails easement. We advocate for adequate trail width and setback from Alpine Road to accommodate different users of different ages and abilities. Another benefit of the new setback would be removal of the cyclone fence and replacement with a more wildlife-friendly one. There are many good reasons to jumpstart the granting of an easement apart from the more lengthy POG process, amongst them being building community rapport and momentum for kids to walk and bike safely to and from school. So that's the first one. Second, shall I keep going?
Please
straight
do,
down the
yeah.
list? Okay, good. The second one regards the town approval process. As it's outlined, Mid-Penn's 66-acre review will go through several in-house process steps, beginning with the POG approval, moving on to Planning and Natural Resources Committee approval, and the governing board approval after that. Separately, the 13-acre historic complex review is scheduled to begin in early 2024, and according to Mid-Penn, will have its own yet to be defined planning process. It will not have a POG, I might add. The Open Space Committee believes that prior to Portola Valley's review process, it is in the town's best interest to request Mid-Penn to coordinate the two pieces, so the town has the benefit of considering the interrelationships and the 79-acre property as a whole. And point 3 is about trail layout and connectivity. This is by and large a hurrah for the Trails and Paths Committee language. So as did many POG members, on October 26th, the Open Space Committee reinforces the Trails and Paths Committee recommendations for trail layouts and trail connections. See the October 24th, 2023 letter, and particularly point to their alignment with the town's general plan objectives for trails and paths. Now, towards that last point, because I thought you might like an illustration, I have provided something that trails, this is not a Trails and Paths map. The Trails and Paths map is black and white and was not as easy for me to grasp as this one. This was just created by Karen Vatra. She was trying to pull together many recommendations that were coming in and had a lot of solidarity and consensus behind them. And she agreed to allow me to share this with you tonight. If you look at it, and I'm sorry we can't share it with the people online, but if you look at it, it points to the various opportunities for connections to town paths, as well as it shows a proposal for the multi-user, as Karen Vatra has identified it, the multi-user trail that, as we know, is a Safe Routes to School Alpine Road Trail, the recommended setback. So this is just for quick illustration for point number 3. And that pretty much completes my report.
Okay, great.
I'm open for lots of comments.
Question. So the trail shown in the dark green, the proposed trail, I'm trying to remember what the existing trail looks like. Is it right on Alpine Road, or do we?
Well,
what is
it's
missing?
not on the tarmac, but it aligns straight there with Alpine Road.
Yeah. And is there a problem with the existing one?
There is. It's tremendously close to Alpine Road, and it's a steep
Steep.
fall off. So moving it back and in would be highly advantageous to more users.
Okay. Yeah. Sounds good.
It's been a town priority for decades.
Oh, I didn't know that.
That was discussed at the site visit.
I don't think that the first item is not controversial. It's whether or not open space, it's not controversial as far as trail. There's a lot of support. There's more support for item number 1 than anything else out there. The question is whether open space wants to weigh in, and the languaging, which I picked up from Trails and Paths, which is let's pull this piece out of the process that MidPen is following is aimed to be inclusive, methodical, and therefore it's not quick. And there is an advantage to bringing this piece out of it because I have not heard one statement against it. It's very common that when you're applying for a conditional use permit, that it comes with easements. It's very common. So there's nothing extraordinary about the request. What this might do, and we could take this out of this letter and send it only to the town council, but advocate for the town council to ask MidPen to accelerate this piece of it. Why? Because we've been waiting a very, very long time. There's really no need to wait for safety when it's going to happen anyway. So we would say perhaps a year by accelerating this ahead of the formal process for the rest of it. So that's really the question.
I have a couple questions. Oh, do we want to go around? So 2 questions. What would be within the conservation easement, the easement to the town? And for the trail that is shown here,
Right. What would be within the conservation?
what would be
easement?
within the easement that,
This isn't a conservation easement, right? This
Right.
is- yeah, yeah.
the easement to the town? What land would be
What
within the
specific?
easement?
What specifically?
Yeah,
Well, so we would have to, this isn't getting into the weeds at that level.
I see.
This is
Okay.
conceptual. There's, somewhere between at maximally 20 yards, 10 yards.
So basically to just include the trail.
This is specific to the Alpine Trail Safe Schools route.
Right, okay. So then the second question I had is, given how much of a drop off there is from the existing trail, would there be grading involved in a new trail, even if it's 20 feet in, or
Well, we think
how are you
alike.
thinking
Yeah,
about that?
I was thinking about that. That's how far I got. I was thinking about that and I picked up the phone and I spoke with Helen, one of the 2 POG members, Helen Quinn, and Karen Batra represent the town. Helen does not believe that there needs to be additional grading, that the disking that's already done, she doesn't think that there needs to be additional grading. I have not walked that trail at that right there and looked at it carefully. She has, so I trusted her. I intend to, after that conversation, walk that trail and look at it more carefully. But for getting ready for this meeting, I didn't have the time.
There was some kind of conversation about a fence that would be
The cyclone
below the-
fence,
below the trail.
the
that would
cyclone fence would
protect it.
have to go, right? The cyclone fence that is there right now, in order to move the trail up and in, would have to be removed. But many people want it removed in any case. That's considered a plus. It's aesthetically not the values of the town. It's not wildlife friendly in one sense. So it would be replaced then with, according to Trails and Passes, asked for a split rail fence. But that to me was too in the weeds for this level.
Terry, you had a question?
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to clarify the proposed trail improvement on the south side of Alpine. in the proposed location would be a supplement to the existing paved trail on the north side of Alpine. Because there is a paved trail on the north side. This would be an enhancement of or an improvement on the natural trail, dirt trail on the south side.
That's accurate.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for that
And
clarification.
it's on the same side of the street as the school is.
No, I realize that. I'm just reflecting on the fact that I see and away from school today using trails on both sides. And so this is an effort to improve the trail on the south side, not just for safe schools, but for all users. Okay, but it's not in the absence of any existing alternative routes right now. Which is a statement of the
I think I
obvious.
follow you, and I think if I follow you correctly, correct. Yeah. I mean, this, again, this is not, the moving of the trail is a foregone conclusion. It's going to happen. It's really a question of when. There's no one speaking up against it.
So as I understand it, we're on item 1 on this draft. We as a committee are thinking about whether we want to endorse basically what other committees have said about speeding up the process. Either A, by sending a letter of our own to MidPen, by B, inviting the town council to try and accelerate it, or C, both. Is that okay?
You've got it.
Okay. So do we want to talk about that first before we talk about the next piece of it, or should we talk about, I don't really know how.
Sure, we could.
Okay. Is there a sense? Yeah, go. Yeah.
Since you guys were at the meeting, is there any impact on the conservation easement that's on the property? Or is this all in the developed part?
Nona's question might have been getting at that. The conservation easement, though, is the conservation looks at the 2 parcels there. They call them parcels. They're
Right.
not tax parcels, but the 2 different pieces, one improved, one unimproved. The conservation easement is owned by Post, so Post kind of gently oversees what MidPen is doing. MidPen is conservative enough that they don't need that much oversight. The Alpine Road Trail dominantly is the part of the Alpine Road Trail that is between Portola Road and in the direction of Saddleback is fine the way it is. And the rest of it is in the unimproved portion. So a little bit more lenient with the conservation easement as it is. And as Helen Quinn represented today, she doesn't think that there would be much need for grading. And I am now, Betsy speaking, qualifying. If there were, it isn't going to be enough to hold it back.
So I guess, and maybe I'm confused, is it in the improved part or the unimproved
Sorry,
part?
the
Because if it's in the unimproved part,
the unimproved part is towards Saddleback.
right,
The improved part is the part that we're talking about.
okay,
that-
so it's in
that
the
is
improved
more
part.
dangerous part that Nona's asking, would that not require some cut and fill?
Okay,
I
but-
had the
but-
same question.
Right, but it's in the improved part of the
The improved
conservation.
part,
Okay, great.
correct.
So
Yeah.
it's probably not
Sorry
going to
if I
get
misspoke. earlier.
tied up in a post having to say, oh, no, you can't make improvements.
It's more lenient over there.
Yeah, on the improved part, yeah, absolutely.
Right.
So, okay, thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, no.
I'm not really clear where the right of way is currently that the town has. So is the current trail in the right of way and does it stop at the fence?
As to the best of my knowledge, the answer is yes. I say that because I have assumed so. But if you live in California long enough, land used to be so inexpensive, that people didn't pay much attention to property lines and they didn't pay for surveys to be done. And it's darn surprising how many people whose fences aren't on the property line. So I can't say with assurance. If Mid-Penn has had the property surveyed, there is a cyclone fence there. I suspect Mid-Penn put it up. I think Mid-Penn's very thorough, so I would think they'd surveyed the property and the
Okay.
answers.
Do we have a feeling as a committee about backing up other committees on this recommendation that the trail we're talking about be sped up if possible in this larger process? Go ahead, Gary.
Yeah. I'm convinced with what Betsy has been telling us, and especially the fact that that offset of the trail has been considered, I guess, by the Trails Committee for some period of time.
Thoroughly.
So this is not anything really new. At any rate, I support us.
Okay. Are there other thoughts about that? Good, Terry.
I just thank our colleagues for doing this work again. And I agree, I support this. My earlier question or comment was really more about clarifying and a point of emphasis that I don't feel like we need to sell this as the backbone of a safe routes for school solution, because I think just on its own merits, even independent of that as you've, I think, already pointed out, there's a lot of agreement that for all users, relocating that trail a little bit further off the main road, especially because of the height and steepness of the trail location would be good. And acknowledging that having a trail on both sides of the road is important. I think that's very defensible and sensible. So thank you for doing that work.
Yes, definitely. Thank you again for all of this work. Terry, I also heard Betsy's emphasis on the school part. It's not in the language we're looking at. So I agree with you that the access for everybody part is what we're talking about. So there are people in the room who know how all of this works better than I do. Do we need to send a letter to the town council, or is it enough for us to support this with Mid-Penn? What would the committee like to do on that? Oh, I'm sorry, Dana. Go ahead and unmute yourself. I forgot about the screen.
No,
Hi,
it's
Dana.
okay. I mean, I just throwing this out there. I'm really, I want this thing to move forward. And I thought the meeting the other night was stunning, just to hear the dialogue about nature and the animals. And I actually understand, because I've met with Mid-Penn there, the reason why the fence is the way it is along Alpine Road. It's really meant for animals not to be running across in very dramatic places, where they would be jumping down 12 feet. Anyway, the point that I'm making is I know that other committees have been engaged to talk about this. I am surprised that ASCC and Planning Commission have not weighed in on this. And I don't want to slow this thing down, but I really surprised about that. So I think that in terms of an ASCC member, I am concerned about the aesthetics of what may happen over there. So anyway, I'm just throwing that out there. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Dana. Karen, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand either. Please unmute yourself.
I'm Karen Batra, POG member at Mid-Penn. It was only this Monday or right after our meeting that I recognized that we already have a graded trail. It's the disc line. And the disc line, if you don't know what they are, is when farmers tear up the earth, and they can't, and they're doing that on a mechanical machine. So implicitly, it's relatively flat. I walked it last Friday. There might be a tiny, tiny bit of grading to come in and out of there, but I really don't think it's going to disturb any of the land because it's already been seriously disturbed for fire. So fire safety. So I don't really think that's an issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karen. Go ahead, Betsy.
I was signaling thank you to Karen for weighing in about the disc line, which I think answers Nona's earlier question and my hanging question. So thank you, Karen Batra, for that and for the use of your excellent map here.
Okay, great. Back to this question of whether we're going to send this to MidPen or MidPen and the council. Both? Is that what people are thinking? Great. Then we have marching orders. I think that good. Thank you for telling me. Got it.
We were going to send it to the POG. Oh, prior to. Thank you.
Thanks, Craig. Great.
Good. We don't need to send it to you folks on the council. That'll speed. Yeah.
Which
So I
will go
think we
through the
wanted
town
to send
manager.
it to the council as well, because I think the idea of acceleration is to get the council and Mid-Peninsula working together.
I think we understand that it won't necessarily go in the packet just because we sent it through the town manager. We'll also ask you to put it in the packet after we send it to the town manager. Is that what you're saying?
So if the goal is to get this as an agenda item on the council to accelerate this process, then yeah, there needs to be a staff report, there needs to be an agenda item. So there's a letter you want to send to the POG that needs to be approved by the town manager before it goes out the door. And then there's getting on the council agenda, which is a different thing, which also would go through the town manager and the mayor. That's the typical thing. And I mean, I can certainly help with that.
I understand. Thank you.
Yeah.
know
Okay.
what
So
to do.
that's, yeah. So they're kind of two related, but separate tasks.
Perfect. Thanks for clarifying that. Okay. So Betsy, I have a question about number 2. I don't feel like I completely understand the stakes. It makes sense to me logically what you've said. Why wouldn't we look at all of it together? Is there something more concrete going on here, or is it just the logicalness of it?
Is there something more concrete?
Are we worried about what might go wrong if they are considered separately?
The impact, I mean, there are a lot of uncertainties about the 13 acres and what is intended to happen at the historic complex. And MidPen has had 11 years. They've been sitting with this property. I believe they've had 3 fairly serious different parties interested in the house and in restoring the house. But when they encountered the state of repair or disrepair of the house at 800 Los Trancos, and when they encountered the tremendous restrictions, even if they were to pull the house into repair, the tremendous restrictions, given that it's an historic structure, all 3 parties have fallen out. So MidPen as recently as about a year ago was back at square one. And so
Is that, I'm sorry to interrupt you, is that why they've pulled those 13 acres out and are thinking about it separately?
not entirely, because they've stated on the materials available online that the process for planning will be commenced in not January, in early 2024. It says that very clearly. So if you, a part of the package that I sent around was a letter in exchange that I had with them, dialing into what that might mean. And I picked up some of my language that's in here from their response to me, but I have here a few quotes. When one of the POG members brought this to the community, Mid-Penn the assistant general manager stepped up after the facilitator attempted to answer it. The assistant general manager said, "We believe this, meaning the 13 acres, should be a separate process." Another quote was, "These should be two parallel," Jane Mark, this is now the manager, Jane Mark is saying these should be two separate parallel plans. And right now, anything we say is speculative. When we have a better long-term idea about what it will look like, good, but it's premature. So I'm pointing to that, saying that the process is starting soon, but there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty. So were I sitting in the role of council member, planning commission, I would say, wait, I want to look at the whole implications of what we're going to do there. I don't want to commit to this traffic and access plan without knowing what your plans are over here. How much risk there is, I just don't know how to weigh it. Probably not a lot. I just don't know.
Okay, thank
And
you.
I
I
think in
understand.
11 years, maybe Mid-Penn can be more forthcoming so that we aren't making, we're not committing ourselves in a vacuum of information.
When you say risk, do you mean risk of surprises down the line, or do you mean the risk that the whole thing will get slowed down by the slowest parcel?
Well, I would say the second risk is already here.
Yeah.
And the first risk is what I was pointing to. So both would be denied.
I guess my feeling at this point is that we just need to send a letter to the police part. Because from thinking about the historic complex, if it took 13 years to get to the area plan, by what they were talking about the archaeological site, and they just don't really want to do that. Mid-Penn wants to concentrate on the area that they've worked out. And so that's one reason.
Okay, others?
I love the complex. I love the idea, but I understand the problem and everything, all the other things that go with it. That's my
What are we, maybe we could revisit this after the December 16 meeting happens, or right, we don't have to decide right now. What do you think, Gary?
Oh, no, I was
With Bev? Okay,
actually sending this letter first, see if it sticks. And then follow it.
okay, that makes sense. Terry, how do you feel about that? So the third one, Betsy, correct me if I'm wrong, this is mostly backing up the Trails Committee.
That's right.
Okay, and does the Trails Committee need our backup?
I doubt it. I mean,
Okay.
I don't think it's, I don't think it's as important as the first item, where they
Okay.
could use the weight. And the weight being for expediting. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Well, shall we then table 2 and 3, but keep an eye on them, and thank you for putting them on our radar screen for sure. And is this the sort of thing that I need to ask for a motion to produce this letter? Is that how this works? Yes. Can I have a motion to? Okay. Thank you, Gary. Second. Thanks, Beth. All in favor? All right. That looks pretty unanimous. So that will happen.
Point of process. then,
Sure.
Carol. With tweaks to the language there and an opening and closing paragraph, is that in Bez and my capable hands? Or may
if-
I float, we can float it back out to the committee. It's just, it won't be a part of the public process unless we schedule a Zoom.
I understand. I, I was gonna say that I was just gonna, do this as the chair,
You
and
would?
I would.
Oh.
That's
I
okay with you
just can't
guys.
Thank you enough.
Well, there we
Tisha.
go.
Thank
That seems like the right path. Yes, I will. I feel like I have the authorization of the committee. Great. Okay, our next item is, it looks like kind of a two-part item. Let's start with the report of our subcommittee that was going to be thinking about maintenance of open spaces and liaising or connecting or something with the Conservation Committee. So let's start there.
So I guess maybe I'll lead off. Does that work for everyone?
Very much.
Okay. So it was decided by the town council in June that the budget for open space maintenance would be less than half of what it was last year, it'd be 44,000. And that it would come from the open space UUT revenue. Conservation was asked to provide some guidance on how that money should be spent. And in order to basically harmonize the work of these two committees, it was suggested that we form a joint subcommittee between open space and conservation to address that request. There was a little bit of confusion about who actually made that request, and it appears it may have been the Public Works Director, but there was some confusion because the council also said that this is a discussion that needs to be carried into the future. So the subcommittee, the joint subcommittee has Betsy and Gary, Judy Murphy, Mary Ann Thunder, and I've been organizing it. We've met twice, and I think that we are at a place now where we are comfortable with 3 recommendations at this point. We have a draft, but it hasn't been approved by everyone on the subcommittee, so I'll just give you the highlights at this point, and then maybe we can have a discussion. So our first recommendation is really to rethink how open space maintenance accounts are managed. And the reason we came to this conclusion or recommendation is that we felt that in order to make informed suggestions about how the money should be spent this year, we need to know how much things cost. And we need to know sort of how this has been done in the past. We were unable to get any information on what things cost. And at the same time, we were told that there really isn't that much flexibility because the bare bones will use up all of this year's money anyway. So we would hope going forward, whether or not there's a budget crisis, that there will be information available on what the open space maintenance costs really are. How many mowings are there per year? How much do they cost? What does Go Native do? And what does that cost? So that's our first recommendation. And there are a number of ways that that could be achieved, but we think it makes good sense, especially if committees are going to have any say in how this is done. We feel like we can't really make informed recommendations. The second thing that we looked at, though, was how does this fit into the bigger picture? And given that the council has said that the input for open space maintenance this year would be 10% of the UUT revenue to open space, i.e. $44,000, we said, well, what actually, where does that money really come from? And also, what's the basis for the that calculation? And it turns out that the Open Space Fund has somewhere on the order of $8 million, we think. Maybe it's $1 million less than that. There's some question about when the last audit was, and so how much we actually know about that. But our understanding from looking at the financial accounting for the town is that the town is only making a little over 1% on the open space fund. And so the revenue that's coming from the UUT is really significant relative to the amount of interest that we're getting on the open space fund. That there are two questions here, really. One is the open space fund being managed to get the best income that it can, or a reasonable income? And the second is, if the 44,000 is really 10% of the open space UUT revenue this year, was the revenue really 440,000, which that would imply, but that wasn't actually the revenue. So there's some kind of confusing calculations going on here. So we would like more information on that. And we would also like so we'd like some transparency on how that's calculated. And also we would like to see the open space fund managed better. And then the third thing that I think we all came around to was just a sort of deep-seated concern that the open space fund is really needed more and more as the town develops affordable housing, confronts wildfire risk and other things. And that if it's used for maintenance only, then we won't be able to do some of the things that we really would like to do and really should do to serve the community in terms of open space and also protect wildlife. So that's sort of where we are, those three recommendations. Protect the open space fund to the extent that we can, revise the management of the open space fund to have a better income on it, and revise the accounting system for open space maintenance. So Gary and Betsy, do you want to correct me or add anything?
Mostly, I want to thank you for distilling what was a lot of wading around in numbers and putting it into language that we could all understand. The high level picture I thought was terrific. So thank you. And Gary, and you might have some specifics to add.
Yeah, well, I have a question, actually, Craig can probably confirm this. It's 10%. We've decided that 10% of that, and we don't know what the R word is.
No, we have the
UUT
wording.
is one number.
Yeah.
But the 10% number, the 44,000 doesn't relate to that. Was the council thinking that it's the sum of the UUT plus the interest, LAIF interest?
The
Because that
wording,
number relates to the 44,000.
the wording was the open space UUT revenue.
Yeah, that's my recollection as well. So, and we can go back and look to confirm, but it sounds like you already have. So that's my, and I also believe we put a cap on how long we were going to do it for. Now, you guys as the Open Space Committee could think about whether we want to put more money into maintenance. I mean, that's a different issue. But at that council meeting, I wasn't willing to go farther than the 10% because I feel like in the past, this committee has said, no, I mean, we get the property ready and we're here to acquire open space, not maintain open space. So, if the Open Space Committee decides they want to go a different direction, then I think you need to work on that and then bubble that back up to the council. As for the 44,000 and the accounting, I mean, there are many financial issues right now. I'd like to tell you that this is one of the big ones. Unfortunately, it's not. This is actually almost down in the noise for me right now. So I'm disappointed to hear you couldn't at least get an estimate for like how many times we mow. Like, it doesn't seem that complicated. Like, if we mow 3 times, and you can put a rough number by that, and at least you know roughly where you were. So it's a little discouraging to me that you got no information at all. I can understand you might not get precise accounting, but I would have expected that you would get some accounting. And as for the 44, I mean, this is a number that you were given by I mean, because it certainly wasn't a council number. Like, we didn't come up with the 44. We just said 10%. Is my recollection.
Cindy came up with the 44.
Okay. So we might have to ask, well, I don't know. I would say it's complicated. If this year you assumed you had 44 and it turns out it was the UUT plus the interest, and this year we made a mistake, I don't think it's a big enough number to matter. I do think we should get back to the council's intent. So, but I'm not sure that right now, with all the audits that are still open and a bunch of other bills that haven't gotten paid, that we're going to get time from Cindy to dig into this. So if this is the number she gave you, I think for right now, I would say you just would run with that number.
Yeah, and I should say that I think for all of us, this was about looking forward,
Yeah.
not about exactly where we are now. But part of our concern looking forward is based on looking at where we
Yeah,
are now.
Yes, yeah.
And I think it is an important question whether or not any of the UUT revenue for open space should go to maintenance. But that would be an easier conversation to have if the open space fund were gaining more interest too.
Sure,
If we had
absolutely.
other income coming into the open space fund.
So, I mean, I can tell you that Finance Committee has been looking at, how we can basically invest our funds in higher returns. So that's something that's in progress. But literally right now, this sort of house is on fire in terms of finances. And so we're just trying to deal with that first. And then the next thing would be to invest in basically a higher yield. And I'm assuming the open space would be an obvious candidate since it's something that we hold over the long term so that we could afford to get it into higher yield. So I think at least I personally am totally in agreement with what you're saying. So what I would suggest is I think writing this up and submitting it to the council as, these are the things that we need going forward in the future without a demand that we need them now.
Yeah.
Right. And which I didn't hear, which is great, but I'm just saying, but I also think that it needs to be put in there because as we get the financials back to where they need to be, this stuff needs to be integrated into it. So, I wish I could give you better news. It's just really the more we look at the finances, the worse it gets. So, it's going to be a little while to sort this out. But I think writing up the issues, absolutely reasonable, and submit them, and then we'll just add them to the list of stuff that needs to get sorted out.
Our attention, if you said it, and I'm saying it twice for emphasis, good. But Nona underlined in her comments today, she underlined one in particular point that I want to call out, which is that we would be asking the town accounting, because town accounting right now, it's tough. And we found some various places where we have questions that are, as you say, are not in the top half of the questions that are outstanding. So for the foreseeable future, we are asking if we can pay in arrears. In other words, that town would use operating funds and then open space funds would pay in arrears. That would help because as we go through and ask for actuals, either ask financial for actuals or public works for actuals, and are unable to tie the last 3.5 year budgets to any actual numbers, we don't have a good idea about what's going out there. And when we have very similar activities or identical activities, such as mowing grass, one might be conservation requirement, one might be a wildfire management requirement. And so it's too easy, particularly in this time when there's so much going on in town. How does accounting supposed to know? So we thought it much the better to ask that we pay in arrears.
You as a committee can certainly make that request. I'm not sure how much traction it's going to get. Just because of this is, and again, I apologize, sounds like a little, this is so far down in the noise that I think the important thing for you guys is to figure out what you think needs to get done in the next year with the $44,000. Like I think that's the value that the subcommittee can bring. The letter that says, and we need to get our financial house in order is totally appropriate. I would just be careful about trying to get too prescriptive. And it feels to me like trying to do stuff in the arrears. You can make that request, but I think it's going to get tabled right now. I mean, again, I'm not the council. I'm one person speaking. I'm just trying to give you a sense of, with the audits that are still open, bills that aren't being paid, things that aren't being reconciled, this is a kind of, and it sounds, I don't want to come across the wrong way, but compared to these other things, this isn't going to get attention right now. So I think that's the question you have to ask, is you can submit it. I don't think what you're asking for is unreasonable. I just would counsel you that it's probably not going to get a lot of traction right now.
Okay, I feel like, thank you so much for that. I think we've got like at least three different things going on right now. I heard you to say really clearly that we need to decide what to do with that 44,000. And I think that's something that conservation has historically done, not open space, right? That those recommendations come out of conservation. Is that right?
Yeah, the only,
Absolutely. But I think where the subcommittee was going, as far as, please weigh in, Gary and Nona, where I thought the subcommittee was going is, wow, conservation asked for 94,000, they're getting 44,000. Let's look at last year and the year before, and let's see how much of that work was actually done, because they might really need that 94,000.
Sure, I was just trying to make
very
a,
short-sighted of us not to give them all the 94,000. And then we got into, can we possibly land this? And that's how we got into these.
right, so I was just trying to make a list of the different things that are all sort of conjoined right now, so we can sort of work through them. Right, so one of them seems to be some kind of question about what to even do with the 44,000. I didn't know that that was not known. Is that?
well, I
Okay.
assumed that the subcommittee was working to come up with that plan, and it sounded like
As
you were
Betsy
told-
said, that's not what we thought the subcommittee was doing at
Okay.
all.
Well, we talked about it in the first meeting.
Okay.
Talked about Spring Down and Frog Pond and the things that go on over there. There's more demand. We haven't narrowed down from we need to circle back and have another conversation, or we can hand it over to conservation and say, call out the 44 and tell us how much we're going to suffer. We haven't said this yet to conservation. Tell us how much we're going to suffer if we tell you you only have 44. Because it could be that next year we're dealing with more problems and we're digging ourselves into a hole.
So just speaking for conservation, the problem is that if you don't know what things cost, then you can't make
Yeah.
a budget. And the exact wording that we got was that the basic operations by Go Native at Springdown and mowing of the 3 main open spaces will take most of the budget. So I think conservation is just going to say there isn't any flexibility. So why are we even being asked?
And do we know what, like, Go Natives? I mean, because this is all the hand weeding and stuff, right?
So so we don't
Yeah.
actually know even that.
Okay,
We know
Well-
some of it is by the town and some of it is, contracting out to Go Native, but we don't know how much, to be honest.
So Howard told me that the mowing that is required for fire is not coming out of this 44,000.
right, but the mowing is sort of a different versus the native.
But if you heard that the mowing will take, we need,
Mowing isn't coming out of this
the mowing that was required for fire safety. So a lot of it, I think.
on Springdown?
So we
We just.
we don't know what's
have the
happening.
information, right?
Not on Springdown.
I guess Public Works were authorized to talk.
Yeah, that's what I was surprised. I'm surprised Howard hasn't been able to give you a crisper answer on what this, I mean, I can believe that the summary might be correct, that it may be that by the time you do a couple of mowings and Go Native, that the money's spent. But I would still expect him to be able to say, Go Native is doing the following things. Because I think that there's a bunch of, I understood it, like some hand weeding and some other stuff going on to try to propagate natives and stuff like that, which is very expensive. And that's one thing that the subcommittee or the conservation committee may have to step back and say, sure, this is the gold standard for how to do this, But maybe for the next 3 to 5 years, we just mow this stuff to keep it in check. And we worry about the gold standard after that. I mean, I don't know what the right answer is, but I agree with you. If you can't understand what the money's being spent
We can't
on.
even find out how much the hand mowing is right
Right,
now.
and so Howard's just stiffing you on this, or, I mean, I don't, know. Who have you asked for that? Because Howard's the person I would ask, because Cindy's not going to know the answer to this, for sure.
So at least 2 people, maybe 3 people
Okay.
wrote to Howard.
Okay.
And at least 1 person wrote to Justin.
I also had a phone conversation with Howard in which I asked for this and he said he didn't have it ready to hand.
Okay, but he didn't have time to get it for you? I mean, I guess it sounds like I should go talk to Howard about this. I think that's maybe the request I'm indirectly hearing, if you guys aren't getting any traction. Because I completely agree with you. If you can't have rough numbers behind this, then it's really hard to figure out. You might as well just say, fine, do whatever you're doing because we can't figure it out anyway. I mean, I think that's what I'm hearing, right? If you can't get some basis for the numbers, then there's kind of no point in getting involved. So, okay, I will put it on my to-do list to get from Howard a little bit more detail on at least bucketed where this money is being spent with maybe a top line of what that item is. Like go native, like understanding like how much is it and what is, what is it they do without necessarily looking at their full contract, but at least get that. And I can send that back to the chair, or maybe we can meet together. Maybe you and I could go and meet with Howard together.
Let me know. Yeah, I'd be
Okay,
happy to.
Okay, great. All right, so that's sort of that piece of it. I'm happy to help with that. What's you had 2 more you wanted to go through?
Well, it's all changed. Here's what I want to propose. I heard you say that the subcommittee hasn't finalized these recommendations. Is that right?
We have a draft and it's been approved by several people, but not everyone has responded.
Okay, so I think that a combination of what Craig and I are going to find out and this coming back to this committee is what we need before we have the conversation about how we feel about spending open space money on maintenance, because we don't know what we're talking about right now. But that's something we'll try and get on the next agenda with these recommendations on the agenda and the information that we get. Does that feel good, or do you want to try and talk about it now?
I guess it depends on what the time frame is if we do that.
Sure,
So if
that's
this
fair.
committee doesn't meet for 3 months, I think that's a longer time frame than our
Oh, I
subcommittee
keep
would
forgetting that
want.
there's a screen. Okay.
So I'd like to, I think it's worth getting this conversation going because before we know it, we'll be working on the next year's budget.
Can I make a comment before we go to public comment or question?
Yes, you
two?
can.
But can I make it now?
Yes.
I was a little confused and a lot concerned. Did I hear correctly that the open space fund is making 1% right now?
Yes.
Yep.
1.1.
Okay. And I think I heard that we just don't have the bandwidth to deal with that right now because there are other things going on, larger things going on.
Yes. But it is, I mean, but that is definitely in the works. It's just not going to happen in the next month.
That's what we've been hearing since May, June.
Okay.
And like I said, it is in the works. I mean, there is nobody disagrees that this is the right thing to do. But we don't have our books closed. We don't have bills paid. And we need to deal with those first. We need to get the finance department lined up so they can do this stuff. And so
I
it's
understand.
terrible that we're only getting 1%. It's sort of part of government life as well, that you have to invest in conservative funds. But the difference between now and 6 months, in my mind, of 1% is not the critical issue right now. It is an issue that we need to move forward on.
Okay.
And I think Bill's been, a strong Bill, has been a strong advocate of moving this stuff forward.
It's
Who's
just
Bill?
50,000 a month that he says we're missing out on.
Yeah, what I was just, that's kind of the point I was just making, about to make, which is hear what you're saying 100%. But that being said, you know, I feel like we're being asked about how to find money for $40,000 in expenses. And every month that's passing is foregoing that amount of budget. And we're talking about an investment opportunity in US Treasuries, which are as conservative as any government or fiduciary investor would put money to work at more like 5%, not 1%. And so I'm just really alarmed for all of us, not for me, but for the town, for this committee, for these questions we're being asked about how to fund essential expenses. And we're backed up on making a decision that really is not a decision that should be sequenced behind other issues, because these are restricted funds that can't go to other areas, right? They're restricted to open space. And anyway, it's very scary that we're backed up on doing something which is zero risk. It's actually almost zero complication. And we're debating these budget issues at the same time as a potential solution is literally right in front of us, and we can't get to it.
And month after month after month,
Yeah.
we hear.
I
this talk.
completely agree. We have a new town manager, we have a new town attorney. I mean, so when we say, you know, since May or June, many things have changed. And I listen, I'm involved in this. I totally understand. I'm very frustrated about this, but it is not zero effort to put this stuff together. So that's the issue right now. And the bandwidth we have, we're down 7 staff members. So we've lost 40% of our staff. So right now we're trying to keep the doors open. So what I would recommend is, if you want to hear more of this in fullness, is, you know, come to the November 8th council meeting. And I think it's a good, you know, please keep bringing these things up, and bring them up in a respectful way. I think that's an important thing, that we keep pressing on this stuff. I'm happy to do that. Like I said, I'm a little bit at wit's end about the finance stuff right now, so as you can probably tell by my comments.
I'm glad to hear it.
I have been ignoring.
What about another suggestion? Would that be in order here now?
I'm going to say
Or-
yes.
And did you, somewhere you got public comments here?
Yeah, I
right?
don't know. I'm coming back to you, I promise. Peter, please unmute yourself. Peter, are you still there?
Yes, I am. Do you hear me?
Yes, thank you for your patience.
I just want to second Mr. Lee's comments. I am quite honestly shocked that we are earning 1% a year, and it probably is not just in the open space fund, but the affordable housing fund and whatever other funds the town has. But just for the open space fund, I did a quick calculation. 4.5, it should be possible to move money into a money market account with a phone call tomorrow. Treasury notes 5%. You're talking about $25,000 a month that is being missed. And yet there's all this discussion about whether $40,000 for a year's budget is appropriate. This should be a no-brainer that could be solved this week. And I'm appalled, and I certainly will ask the question at the council meeting next week. Craig, I appreciate the wall of yarn that you're trying to deal with, but this should be something easy to solve. And it's not the $40,000; it's the roughly $400,000 a year that the open space fund should be earning if it were in treasury notes.
Yep, agreed. So
Thank-
please come to the meeting and make those comments.
Thank you, Peter. Dan, are you there? Would you like to say something?
Yeah, I'm glad I stayed in the meeting. I was just coming for oral communications. But I also want to remind your committee that in 2019, we have $110,000 pledges from people in the town for the preservation of the road remnant and to become open space. And that has never been formally has never happened. And the impetus for that as well was to raise money for the frog pond in the future. So, that was supposed to be a beginning of juicing, of making money for open space, and it fell flat on its face. I mean, two of our pledges have died since 2019. Are we ever going to do that? I don't know. So it's just kind of it every once in a while. Yes, I do find myself scratching my head saying, what's going on? I mean, open space acquisition was central to the philosophy of our town. And I want to hang on to that. And that's why, I mean, when I opened, I was so excited about Jellic. And I really think we want to do that. But hell, I mean, if we're going to be down the road on Jellic 10 years from now in this capacity, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So we need to be able to make this work. Anyway, thank you guys for your efforts.
Thank you, Dana, and thank you for the reminder about those pledges. I know that you mentioned that to me before. That's something I'll make sure that the Open Space Committee addresses in upcoming meetings. I'm wondering, speaking back to your comment, Nona, shall we plan a sooner meeting again to talk about this give ourselves some amount of time to try and get the information that we need so that we can talk about it? Or would you prefer to have the conversation in the abstract about?
I think I would propose a two-step thing of just asking conservation if we're only talking about 44,000. We don't need to invoke the Open Space Committee if we're just limiting it to the 44,000. And then our joint subcommittee should just send a letter to the council so that we can add our voice to the November 8th meeting. That would be my preference.
Great. And then go ahead, Terry.
I would second that. I mean, if we're talking about sharing our recommendation on the Hawthorne's parcel from the town manager and council, and if there's a way to communicate our suggestion about addressing open space fund returns, potentially as a solution in part for open space expenses, that we also address a letter on behalf of this committee on that point as well. It may or may not, be able to move mountains because we understand that there are a lot of other complications and issues being addressed. But I'd hate for the simplicity and clarity and obviousness of that as a real opportunity and solution at very low effort for significant material identifiable benefit for all of us, not just this committee, for the town, to not be clearly communicated to the council and the town manager. And again, it's really just that message, respecting all the other things that are on everyone's mind. But I'd hate for us to miss that opportunity to make it super clear that is low hanging fruit.
Terry, you're suggesting that would also be in the letter that I'm going to send. Great.
Either probably in a separate letter.
Okay.
To
I just wanted to make
clearly
sure I
communicate the
understood.
simplicity of that. And I believe it's within the scope of this committee's responsibility, right? If we're making recommendations about open space, not just acquisitions, but expenses and whatnot, that, we're making a relevant recommendation.
Yeah, so I would write separate letters. I mean,
Got it.
I think you have 3 separate letters here, as I understand it. You have the Hawthorne's letter. You have the future of we need to be able to understand costs, expenses, et cetera. And then you have the, what are you doing with our funds letter? The nice thing about what are you doing with our funds is I think that's a great one to put in as part of this financial discussion, because all the council members will read it. And then somebody from this committee ought to basically step up when we get to that section and just remind the council, it's like, it's 25,000, it's 50, whatever that number is, that, we've been limited to 44 and yet we are foregoing this every month. This is a critical thing. And that doesn't mean it's going to get done tomorrow. And I would beg you not to say, pounding your shoe on the desk and saying, it should have happened yesterday. At this point isn't very helpful, even though it's justified, it's just not helpful. But making the point so that all the council members see it and it's top of mind at that meeting, because I think that's, as a council member, I can tell you that that's one of the critical things is making sure it gets floated at the appropriate time. And that's certainly the time to
Got
do
it.
it.
And I'm happy to help work with Nona or you to draft that brief. It's very brief.
Very brief.
And I
exactly.
agree with you that we don't have to get all judgmental about anything. It's really the communication
Yeah.
of the facts and the opportunity and the clarity of that. That's
Terry, I'll take you up on the help with that letter, because I think I'm doing the first two, and it sounds like the joint subcommittees will send the third letter we're talking about. Is that right? Is that what you just said?
Say that again?
The request for greater transparency and more information, I thought you said would be coming from the joint subcommittee. Is that right?
So we had three parts to our report. One is greater transparency, and one is better investment on the fund. One is better accounting.
Sure. No, maybe I misunderstood. I just thought I heard you say that the joint subcommittee would send a letter to the town council. Did I hear that wrong?
I think that's what I proposed.
Perfect. Yeah.
That's a proposal.
And I will say that breaking out the piece that's appropriate for the finance committee meeting coming up this next Wednesday is one thing, but this also hangs together as a story quite well. And when you take the pieces apart, they start to lose a little bit of relevance. So I wonder about that.
I think
myself.
the letter that we're talking about, but that covers those three things, also includes the thing that Terry and I are talking about it. They'll hear it
Oh,
twice.
so we're not
They'll hear
gonna
it
tear
from
apart
just
the
our committee
Good.
and they'll hear it from the joint subcommittee as well. Is that what other people understood? Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So then just so, because it's lovely to be with you, but so that we're not here all night. Do we still want to talk about our feelings as a committee, our judgment about, as a committee about whether these funds should be used for maintenance? You had said you don't want to put that off too long. And I'm wondering about putting it off for some short amount of time while we gather information, or
Well, Nona's thinking, may I approach that question from another direction?
please.
Because the next item on our agenda tonight approaches the accelerator for many of us to show up for open space and open space acquisition.
Right.
So if we approach it from what we really want to do with the money, and when there are compelling things on the horizon, perhaps it's more understandable why we're reluctant to want to step wholeheartedly into seeing this money dwindle down because of animal
I agree with
maintenance.
you. And there's something artificial about the things being split out on the agenda. So maybe we'll leave it for a minute and move to that conversation.
That's fine with me.
Okay,
I think
great.
that makes sense.
Okay, thank you for helping us figure that out. Betsy.
And can I just get
Sure.
clarity? Are we still talking to Howard to try to get some sense?
You
for-
and I are.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that's still
Yes,
part of what we're doing.
Yes,
Okay.
please. I think everyone sitting here is really
Okay.
looking forward to the outcome of that conversation.
Okay. If I may recommend that you loop in Catherine McGill, since she's the chair of conservation, and we're basically recommending that conservation make the decision on how to allocate. She's
Sure.
the one who really needs the information at this point.
Okay, that seems very reasonable. And then I would suggest you guys meet next month, because we can certainly get this information you're asking for from Howard. We can get that before a meeting a month from now.
Okay. It's feeling like
But I'm just
it's
saying,
feeling
I
like
think you
that's
could move stuff forward.
what we need to do, given the amount of uncertainty we have right now. What do people think of that?
That would be Thursday, the 7th of December.
I would have to check with the town, of course, to make sure that we can meet on that day, but provisionally. Is there a time window on the Jellic Ranch opportunity that people are aware of?
Of course, there is always the potential that a buyer will come along. That would be the time limit.
And if open space wanted to be part of trying to acquire that, it would be the town that would be acquiring it, right? So this is another thing we would be taking to the town council. You know, I'm honestly trying to understand what our advisory role would be in this process.
My guess is on that one, the council would probably come back to you and ask for your input on it. I mean, this one's really, I mean, this is big. I mean, we'd have to understand how buildable it is. I mean, there's a bunch of issues. Dana
Understood.
talked about a bunch of possible things, but somehow we'd have to figure out, I mean, it's all that real. There, you know, there is an earthquake fault that runs right through that property, and what are the consequences? And then the other question is, yeah, realistically, where are we going to come up? What is it? $19.5 million for that property? So I think it's good that we're thinking about it. It doesn't, I mean, I'm being honest, it doesn't feel to me like something we're going to be able to execute on quickly. But, you know, Dan and I have some different ideas. I mean, you know, maybe we can raise money, but if it's sort of one of these things, we have to borrow $20 million and then sell property later to pay it back. God, I got to say, in this financial situation, that seems pretty hard to see how that's going to happen.
Understand.
So, you know, again, let's keep being creative and certainly, you know, like Dana did here, I think, you know, somebody should bring it to the council and say, you know, there's this great possibility. It's just, it's going to have to get on an agenda, which is, you know, next year, I think realistically, you know, January timeframe, maybe it gets on the council agenda for discussion. And even then it would be, we'll go look into X, Y, and Z. So I have no sense for how much interest there is in the real estate, you know, I mean,
It must be some kind of Murphy's Law that the most exciting possibilities come along at the time that you can least cope with it.
exactly.
And so it always happens like that in real estate. I have a sense, first of all, I completely concur. Were I in your shoes, I'd be going, huh, I can afford to look at this, you know, not at all. So all the creativity and such will have to come over here and the work that we go in. And we need to do a lot of brainstorming.
Yeah.
It's huge.
It's a huge possibility. I mean, if there is a there, I agree with you. And El Mirador Ranch is similar. It's tied up with a bunch of post stuff. It's even in some ways more complicated, but both of those, I mean, you know, these are properties of a lifetime kind of
Are
things.
you allowed to share what you know about El Mirador? Because there's a lot going on around town and more grounded information would be welcome.
There's not a lot I know. My understanding is it's going up for auction. But I have, you know, beyond that, it's encumbered with loans and other stuff. I mean, it's not clear what's going to happen in an auction. I mean, just because of what's there.
The publicly posted notice, shall I continue? You're looking at me
Sure.
quizzically,
No,
because we're kind of lurching into our final.
yes, we're there.
We're there. Okay, good. The publicly posted almanac notice mentioned that this was not an auction for the real property, but for the lien on the real property. And then it went on to share that it was, that there were potentially other liens on the property, and this might not be the primary lien. My question was that post trying to cover themselves, or do they know that there are other liens?
So this is stuff that Post knows that, you know, all I know is that it's complicated and it's not going to get sorted out in the next couple of months. I mean, I went to talk to
Well, the
Post to say,
auction's the 22nd of this month, so that will be.
I
the-
understand that, but I'm saying I went and talked to Post about the possibility for housing, because obviously with the Ford Field stuff. And, you know, Walter's sense was it's 2 years before this knot's going to get untied. So I can tell you that much, but what they know about this auction or something else and liens and stuff, you know, I don't know. That's what, you know, in Post. But
In a
they're, I mean, they're
general-
well aware of all this stuff. I mean, it's not like somehow this is coming out of the blue for them, but I think there's a lot of stuff that needs to get untied.
And it's possible that Post itself is a bidder. We don't know.
Exactly. I think we don't know. And it's also, I mean, for you who don't know, it's tenants in common
Yeah.
property, which makes it more
Yes.
complicated from a real estate point of view. So, so I trust Walter when he tells me that it's going to take 2 years to sort of sort this stuff out.
Which is short term in this sense of the town's multiple.
Well, and I say 2 years, like that was sort of like, like 2 years or so before we even are at a point where we might have enough horizon to be able to have a discussion. I mean, who knows how long it takes to actually get things cleaned up, which is a different issue. So,
Dana, is your hand still up from before, or did you want to weigh in here?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Because I think these are lifetime properties and I want to hear open space get behind them. And, if Jellic is up, if Moore's Head is up, I want you guys to say, yes, let's do it. And we, as a community, we can do this. I feel strongly we can do it for Jellic. So I want to hear some enthusiasm. I want to hear some engagement. We should do this. The proximity of Jellic to the town-owned property is, we need to do it. So, I mean, I hope you guys will provide leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana.
and I felt like Betsy's point was a good one, which is, this is the committee to sort of come up with creative ideas and get them down on paper. Absolutely. I mean, and I think that's the best you can do right now is get that stuff, get some good ideas down on paper so that when we have the ability to look at it, we can say, okay, this isn't quite as scary as we thought. Maybe there is some way to start working on this sooner than later. But just as go spend $20 million, I think that if it doesn't go any further than that, I think right now nobody on the council at least has time to sort of figure out like, okay, what would we do next? But you guys could do that. You guys could, and much like what Dana was saying, I mean, I think there's a lot of stuff there. I think getting that stuff written down and then sent into the council, that would be great. That would be super helpful.
And
Okay.
I started with all the committees. So each committee is each person who was there is supposed to take it to their committees and engage their committees. So if we can engage it, this whole thing from a town government perspective, then I think that's a good thing.
Thank you, Dana. Maybe open space can be the clearinghouse committee for all of the good ideas that all of these committees are going to come up with, and then we can bring them to the town council. That sounds like a really exciting role for this committee.
Or
have.
the committee of committees.
Ooh, because that's so fun to convene. Okay, so I wanted to just say briefly, Betsy, that generically in the language of a legal notice, there's not any special reason to be suspicious of it saying there may be other liens. That would be sort of boilerplate language. So you're such a good and careful and attentive reader, and you're always looking for the tell, but that might be boilerplate. So does that make sense?
If you read it and feel that it is boilerplate, that would be interesting to know. It was so specific.
Okay, we'll look at that. We can definitely look at that. So this next, I'm going to say that since I joined this committee, I've been confused about what we were up to. And I thought maybe we were a fundraising committee, and I thought, oh, I'm not going to be good at that. And we've spent a lot of time talking about maintenance.
You still may be.
Yeah. And now it feels like because of these, it felt like the 8 million was never going to buy us anything in the conversations that I heard. And all of a sudden it feels like the 8 million might be part of something really big, maybe part of something that changes the pressure on Ford Field, maybe part of a larger fundraised set of solutions. So I feel like this does weigh on the maintenance funding question too. If we don't have enough money to buy anything, then I'm persuaded that we should do some maintenance. If we maybe can be part of a solution, my sense of that changes. Is the committee interested in doing some aggressive, creative thinking about trying to get this kind of property now? Is that the conversation we're having?
I think that's the conversation we're kind of having. I'm not so sure what aggressive means, because aggressive. it
More than
means-
we've been
It
doing.
means heavy lifting and it's a okay, my risk averse nature is coming out here. It's a
Mhm.
very risky environment right now. As you can, it was risky before October the 7th.
Right.
And now it's extraordinarily risky. And so real estate values could swing pretty wildly, and they also could seize up. So walking into this environment has its fair share of like, whoa. And as Dana said with such great passion that we love her for, these are irreplaceable properties. And we don't get to pick the timing. So I think we'll regret if we don't get out there and do our level best to see what we can shake out of the trees.
Right.
You call that a
No, I take aggressive back. Strike aggressive and substitute creative, because that is the better language that Craig gave us. And I want to adopt Craig's excellent language.
December 7th we're already on the calendar for December 7th.
Of course we are. No, no. Hmm.
So it seems to me that to get people on board, what we need is something like the vision statements that Gary is talking about for the existing open space parcels. And, you know, you did a brilliant job on the one for Springdown, which was the sort of inaugural one, as I recall. And I think that people sort of see the picture when it's created, you know, sort of from all the pieces. So I don't know if you're enthusiastic about that, but you did a great job on the ones I've seen.
Well, you made it better. So,
No,
Yes, vision statement. I was going to bring that up. There's so many parts to this situation, you know, with thinking about housing, selling part of the property, using the rest for recreation or whatever. So a vision statement, I'm not sure how I would put it together. Are all those three things, are they compatible? Are they possible? I don't know the answer to that. I'd be making a guess. But a vision statement, and I've mentioned that to Dana as well. And something else that I mentioned to her is about, what is it, about 11 years ago, we rebuilt this town center. And we had a committee. I was on it. It's a fundraising committee. And there were 7 or 8 members. We hired a consultant, and it took us 2 years to raise 16, 17 million. So it's sort of on the scene. So those all these parts to this that are important. And whether there's a way around it, I don't know. I think Dana said something with maybe part of it could be broken off and sold more immediately. And our 8 million would help. So there are some good ideas out there. Vision statement doesn't usually contain how you get there money-wise. So
No,
that's
yeah.
that's a whole other job to
but
to
I,
do. I think.
yeah, if there's a vision, then that's how you raise the money, I think,
Yes.
is with the
Yeah.
vision. I would
And
hope.
We really ought to figure out what we're going to do with the property before we jump in.
Or
Yeah.
maybe plan A or plan B, or I
Oh,
don't know
yeah.
that there's only one way to think about the property, but having, you know, a few visions would be really great.
Yeah, I mean, when I was suggesting creative, I mean, I think that's what you need to think, like, how would the property get used? And then at some point, you're going to have to think about, are we comfortable spending open space money to see this vision happen? So, it's sort of a 2-part thing. But yeah, I think you're right. I think you need to first think about, what do you do with that property? I mean, is it just the fields that become open space and the rest turns into something else, or are there other things? And And coming up with creative ideas for that and painting that picture, I think is exactly what you could do. It would be very helpful.
Yeah, I feel like what's being talked about is that it isn't an open space vision statement, even though that might be our entree to the opportunity and our focus. A solution might be some combination of, how an housing element, a parks and rec element, a trail element. I mean, it's a different version of reimagining town center, right? The project that Gary was referring to. So it's both exciting and a little daunting, just being a little realistic. That doesn't mean we shouldn't figure out how to dive into it a little bit, but it would be misleading to just focus on the open space opportunity, for all the reasons we've already discussed.
Parents around the world put a whole lot of eggs in getting their kids into Stanford or Harvard. And I pronounce that the odds of our getting this deal done are much better. So we can afford to go for it.
That's a wonderful analogy. Thank you. Help me as it comes to 9, much appreciated committee, know what to do now with where we are. I feel like there's definitely the sense that there needs to be something imagined and written up. Gary's obviously the person to do it because he has nothing else to do. And it's something that many of us will be involved in, but we have to be careful of our Brown Act limitations. And so I'm honestly saying, help me help the committee figure out what the next steps for us are, because I'm not sure that waiting even till December 7th for the mission statement work. Am I right that that's too long?
Well, I'll take a crack at it. Apart, so it's great.
Oh, You're lovely. Yeah, I don't know if that's something we need to vote on. Yeah.
I don't know, is it gonna work out? It'll be probably around Thanksgiving time.
Or were you proposing meeting in November, or we're on the calendar for the
Can work
first Thursday?
earlier.
I just don't know how fast it's all going to go.
Well,
And
the
so
auction is November 22nd,
you're talking about
the
the
Mirador.
yeah,
So
that we're
that's gonna go.
that's not something we're
That's
at.
gonna
That's
go.
not an action item for us.
My sense personally is that the Thanksgiving week is probably not going to be the week that knocks us out of commission. Are we going to be ready in 2 weeks to meet?
I'm fine with waiting till December. I just really want to, please give me direction, you guys, about how you want to proceed. I don't know what we should do.
I'd stay with the 7th.
Okay. All right. And so a draft will be circulated and agendized.
First, and I guess it could be sent around.
We'll figure out how to do that appropriately. Yes. Yeah, I will figure out how to do that appropriately. Okay. Thank you, Craig, for that. Thank you for that. That's what I was trying to find out. Thank you for that suggestion. Great. Got it. Terrific. Gary, would you like, go ahead.
Would it make sense to include a non-committee member like Dana on the subcommittee if she's available?
Okay, great.
So the subcommittee is Gary and Titian, or?
Yeah, if you can stand it, Gary.
Thank you both.
Great. Is that something we vote on, or we just proclaim?
We probably need them.
Okay, do we have a motion to form this subcommittee?
I move that we form a subcommittee,
Great. Do we have a
a
second?
vision subcommittee,
A
is it?
vision
Yes.
subcommittee.
And appointing.
Thank you,
Gary
Nana. All in
Fisher.
favor? Okay, looks like we're unanimous about that. Great. We have many action items. I'm very grateful to all of you for the good work that we have done today. I'll confirm that, oh no, we are on the schedule already for the 7th of December, so we'll be meeting then. Shall we have a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
Thank you, Gary. Second? Bev says she'll second. Oh, please. I'm sorry. I was going too fast. Oh, okay.
told that the department water is November 10th. Did you sign up? No. I've been there,
I
but
did
you
s-
said something about it.
Bring you. I signed up for 2 people.
Okay, but then you said something about fog.
To clarify, the POG, we're not going with the POG. This is this was independently offered by Midpen
Okay.
to get other people on site.
Great.
POG is going separately in groups that are smaller and it will be a private tour to the POG.
Thank you for clarifying that. Okay, I think we have a motion and a second. Are we voting to adjourn? Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Okay. Wait, who made the motion? Betsy? Did you move it? We adjourn? And Terry? Gary. Or Terry?
Gary
Okay.
moved and Bev seconded.
You made the one. Which one?
So Craig, the trick is I've got to leave the meeting on here. And the next time I try and get on a meeting, I need to make sure that there's not an opportunity to leave. Thank you. That was something I will learn.